Europeans are basically a, a very, very narrow segment of this parasitic leadership who are all extremely unpopular in their own countries.
Right.
So you basically have a small cabal that's running the show, that's hostile to Russia, that wants the United States to do its, as usual, do its heavy lifting and dirty
Knock
work in
some
Ukraine.
heads and be an
Yeah,
idiot. Yeah.
they basically want the United States to go and kill Russia for them. That's what they want.
Yeah.
And now they're not getting it. And not only that, but daddy's going to tell them transfer the damn assets to to
To
us
us.
and we'll take care of you. I know a lot of people will say that I give him too much credit, but um, take the Bosnia story into account and then see if I'm giving him too much credit. Uh, Trump is a flawed man. His administration is full of uh, clashing interests as well. But ultimately, the will of the people will prevail. So if you know what the issues are, if you know what you want from your political leadership, make that known. Defend your positions, understand that your voice matters, and I think that we're really in a good shape and that we're winning this fight. We
Alex Krainer, good afternoon to you, my friend. How are you?
I'm very well, Andy. Thank you for the invite and warm greetings to your audience.
Well, it's always warm greetings to you. I always look forward to your talk, to our talks, if you would. And by the way, you've been I don't want to give up where you are, but you were out and about doing your thing. Yeah, how did all that go, if you would, and welcome back home.
Yeah, thank you. It's nice to be back home. I've been mostly on the road for um, more than 3 weeks now. So it'll be nice to settle in until Christmas. Anyway, it went well, very busy. Obviously, it's kind of reduced my ability to cope with the news flow and the correspondence and everything. But, we're living in one of those periods where I guess decades happen in weeks. It's very hard to keep up, and even more so because a lot of what we do get is psyops and theater. Um, so it's hard to read the situation, but I think that certain patterns are emerging, and I feel actually kind of encouraged and optimistic about certain developments.
Yeah, about all of that, not to cut you off, is like, I was talking to Luongo and then my kids, I was mentioning to my kids, and I was also talking to Dave Colum. It's like, what's real and what's not? That was really the theme. And so I'm anxious to get your opinion on that. Let's start with the European conflict, Ukraine, NATO, Russia, all of that. We hear one. I heard that there's peace and there's not peace on the table. All of that, work that out for me. What's theater? What do you see as theater? And what do you think is actually happening with that?
So, what are we? We are Monday, 24th November. On Thursday, 20th November, um, somebody from the Trump administration leaked out the 28-point peace plan for Ukraine, which is not really a plan. It's more like a framework. It has 28 points. Each of those points could be a 2 or 3 page document. But as framework, I think it's a very encouraging foundation for peace negotiations. And there are some of the provisions in that peace proposal which I find very encouraging. Namely, it is addressing in a real way some of Russia's security concerns, which is what kind of coerced Russia into intervening in Ukraine. And that is that Ukraine is being asked to commit not to join NATO. Not only that, Ukraine is asked to enshrine that into their constitution, that they would not become part of a Western military alliance like NATO. Uh, so that's a real step in the direction of peace. Um, the NATO itself would have to adopt an article proscribing Ukraine as a member of NATO in the future. So that's very good. To my mind, a very positive provision there is that Russia would have to adopt a law through their legislation committing not to attack any Western European country or NATO country. So why is that important? Because, Europe is being submerged in psychosis and fear that the Russians are coming and you have so many of these Western officials who have no qualms about, looking into the camera and saying, well, Vladimir Putin has made it clear that once he's done with Ukraine, you know, they're going to continue all the way to whatever, Paris or London or, and of course, if you ask them where exactly did Vladimir Putin make that clear, he didn't. They cannot point you. They just say it. But the reason why they say it is because they want the people in Europe to feel afraid. And then they tell them, well, guess what? It's going to be necessary for you to sacrifice your children, which is what this Fabien Mandon, the head of the head of the Russian, sorry, head of the French, he's the chief of defense staff. He's like the top commander of the French military.
Hmm.
Um, and he said that recently. At a gathering of mayors of France, and he told the mayors to go back to their town and to pass the message on to their citizens to say, we have to all prepare for war, and you're going to have to sacrifice your children. So this is where we're at. Um, the If Russia enshrined into its law that it will not attack Western nation, that it has no intention of spread, escalating and enlarging the war westward, then these claims lose credibility, and people can rightly say, "What are you talking about? The Russians have actually passed a law that they will not go and wage war on other Western nations. So why on
Right.
earth would we have to go and sacrifice our children to fight Russia when Russia is not a threat to us?" So that's good. Other provisions which I thought were extremely interesting was about the reconstruction of Ukraine, and they said that they would, 100 billion euros from Russian frozen funds would be used, and that the Europeans would contribute another $100 billion into that fund, and pretty much that the United States and Russia would be in charge of that, and that would not only be used to reconstruct Russia, but as a way of deepening the constructive cooperation between Russia and the United States. The word they use is bilateral relations, but it's clear that by those bilateral relations they mean Russia and the United States, not Russia and Ukraine or United States or Ukraine. It's Russia and the United States. And so that is kind of consistent with what we know was discussed in Alaska last August. And so far, the Russian reaction has been cool, let's say, but positive. And the obstacle is the Europeans and the Ukrainians. But the Ukrainians are under increasing pressure to cooperate, and the means of that pressure is the ongoing anti-corruption investigation, which has exerted enormous pressure on Vladimir Zelensky and his closest collaborators. in government and near the government. And we've seen the three of them already bolted to Israel because I guess Israel doesn't extradite people, so they feel that they're safe there. But apparently, this is just the tip of the iceberg because that is concerning some 100 million that they embezzled. But the larger amounts that they're talking about are much greater, and I've seen 48 billion. I've seen
Gosh.
estimates of between 50 and 100 billion. And apparently, a lot of that money has been laundered through European banks, particularly Estonian banks. So I think that that's the means of exerting pressure on European leadership to cooperate.
Mhm.
And that might take a little bit of time and finagling and arm twisting, but I think that the direction and of developments and those 28 points as a framework for negotiation is actually very encouraging because not only could it bring peace between Russia and Ukraine, but it's obvious that its intent is um, to create a whole new security architecture for Europe in general. And then it also has provisions. Sorry, I lost my train of thought because somebody
No,
just
it
called me,
has
and I meant to say something, but now it's just like poof, went
that's
gone.
that's okay. So provisions, yeah, for what, if you would. And this again, I guess what's interesting to me,
Oh yeah, sorry.
go
The
ahead.
for the nuclear disarmament talks. That's what I
Yeah,
meant to say, which is something that Trump has been talking about, but
yeah.
nothing has been done. But now, first time we see it in black on white as the intent in future discussions and negotiations.
This fits really well with, I guess, the chain that we've been seeing. If you look, you just have to look a little bit deeper again with Putin and Russia. I mean, Putin and Trump meeting in Alaska, but even before then, with what we talked. And in fact, you've been on record as saying, like, specifically Germany should look east, and also multiple times the US and Russia working together, not only for security, but also for the development of natural resources, if you would. And it looks like that's playing out. Is that what you're seeing? I guess, and that gets away from the theater of continual war or whatever, or is that still theater, if you would?
I think that's all real, but it's encountered some hysterical opposition. I can't imagine that opposition wasn't anticipated.
Mhm.
It probably was, but it's real because the Europeans are absolutely in a tizzy about it because their main imperative is for the war to continue at least long enough for European powers to prepare for war when they run out of Ukrainians, that they can push the Finns, the Baltic people, the Poles, the Romanians, Moldovans, everybody to continue this war against Russia because they will not give up. And then the Europeans have a very significant problem in their financial markets because it seems that their financial system is disintegrating. Their economies are in a
Yeah.
catastrophic state. And now, one of the provisions in the 28-point plan is that the frozen assets will be unfrozen.
Frozen
This is
Russian assets.
Yeah,
Assets.
yeah, yeah, correct. It doesn't say Russian assets, it just says frozen assets will be unfrozen. And this is something that I've um, kind of anticipated already since the time when Trump first called up Vladimir Putin in February. And then they had, both reported that the talks were, they spoke for over an hour, I think 2 hours, and both reported that the talks were very positive. Because to me, those frozen assets are such an obvious lever to use.
Hmm.
in the interest of peace and against the warmongers in Europe. Because the problem in Europe is that they are running out of liquidity. They're having liquidity issues in the financial system, and they need collateral. They need good collateral. And those, we're talking about 300 to 200 and 320 billion dollars of frozen Russian assets. And about 220 billion of that is in Europe, mostly in Belgium under Euroclear. But then there's also some billions in the UK. I think about 37 billion, about 40 billion in France, uh, something in Germany, I guess. I'm not sure. But they were all counting on that money to use it as collateral in their financial systems to create a large credit impulse to kind of refloat, the European banking sector and their economies. And Emmanuel Macron was openly fantasizing about using it to provide credit for French companies to become, large contractors in the rebuilding and reconstruction of Ukraine. And so, for the Russians and for the Americans, uh, a way to take that weapon out of the hands of Europeans is to transfer the money into the American custody. And I think this is what the peace plan envisions. And that would leave the Europeans with really no cards to play and no money with which to play and no collateral with which to fund credit expansion. And if you don't have collateral to expand credit, then you have to just simply print money out of thin air with no collateral, which then leads to inflation and hyperinflation. And for Russians, the reason why this is interesting for Russians because they can deal with the Americans. They can negotiate. They have cards to play with the Russians, with the Americans, and Trump administration is obviously open to those deals and negotiations because Russia has an absolutely massive treasure trove of natural resources that are yet to be developed. And so, for Trump, it's a no-brainer to have American companies and businesses be included in all that. In that way, Russia gains an ally in the United States, and this itself it's not spelled out in those exact words in the 28-point plan, but it's there in gist and in other words like, you know, deepening the bilateral relations, obviously between Russia and the United States. And then you've clipped the wings of the warmongers in London and in Paris and in Berlin. So after Alaska, I've published an article titled Alaska and the Russian Frozen Assets, something to that extent. That was the title. And that was exactly what I was saying. I said that uh, in due course, we will learn in the news that the Russians ordered the frozen assets to be transferred to the United States. And if Trump says transfer the darn assets, the Europeans are going to have no choice. If the Russians tell them, they will say like, no, they're frozen. You're war criminals. You engaged in unprovoked aggression against Ukraine. So, we'll help ourselves to that. But if Trump tells them, no, do as ordered, they have no choice. And so that money is going to find its way to the United States. It's probably going to go under some fund that's going to be maybe part of the US sovereign asset fund or whatever, but it's going to be an American uh, project
Right.
under American sovereignty. Russians are going to be partners in that. And as far as Russians are concerned, this is the best use of that money. You know,
Yeah.
Russia is doing well economically. They are making they let's say they don't need that money.
Yeah.
They don't need to plug up holes. Their debt to GDP is very low. It's like something like maybe 16% in spite of the war. So they got all kinds of maneuvering space, credit wise. Their economy is growing. The standard of living is going up. Pensions and salaries have increased by, I think, double since the war in Ukraine started. So Russia can deal, and they can use this money to, incentivize the United States to shift their allegiance. But it's not just a question of money. Russia really is a natural ally to the United States, and Russia and the United States have been allies for a century before the 20, through
Before
the
the
whole.
Cold War. Yeah.
No, 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 not just before the Cold War. Throughout the 19th century, Russia and the United States were allies and very close friends.
Yep.
This has been scrubbed out from history, but they both had the same enemy, which was the British Empire. And I think that today we're looking at a replay of those same dynamics and those same power politics. And again, we see that uh, the United States is extricating itself from these alliances that basically treated the United States as the as the military enforcement arm, whereas
Yep.
the real beneficiaries of the Western Empire have been the European banking cartels and their partners on Wall Street primarily.
Right. Okay. So this is brilliant analysis, if true, and I believe it to be true. This is absolutely brilliant. And it makes a lot of sense because I was wondering, okay, so let's go. Why does it make sense? Let's say the US is these assets are now under air quotes US control. Russia still gets the money because we'd funnel it back to them in rebuilding Ukraine or taking out their Russia's natural resources, correct?
Yes, well, you see,
So we both win,
the
meaning
exactly
US and
because
Russia.
Russia, it's not in Russia's interest to have an impoverished, desperate, rump Ukraine on its borders.
Right.
It serves Russia's interest to have developed, prosperous Ukraine on its borders. And then, Ukraine would become, its status as far as Russia is concerned would be similar to that of Belarus. A friendly nation with which Russia has cultural, political, and business and economic ties,
Yeah.
uh, infrastructural connections, and a security buffer between the Europeans and the Russian mainland. Because, Britain is an island, it's surrounded by oceans. United States has Atlantic and Pacific Oceans.
Hmm.
Russia has no such thing. Between Western Europe and Moscow, there's just like a plane.
Right.
It's, Russia it has always felt very vulnerable in this sense, and they are pretty obsessed with security because they've been the target of invasions from the West for centuries now.
As they should be, right. As they should be concerned. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why it is in their interest for that money to be invested in Ukraine to reform Ukraine. Not a hostile little Nazi state, but let's say a developed, prosperous state with whom they trade and with whom they have positive, friendly, constructive relationship. And then that state becomes a buffer that makes it very difficult for European powers in the future to contemplate any kind of an invasion against Russia. And then
Right.
the 28 point peace plan also envisions rooting out Nazism, any
Right?
racist, yeah, 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 any racist ideology, Um,
I laugh because that's why isn't the West on board with that, right?
well, yeah, that's exactly. Why wouldn't they say like, well, this is wonderful. Let's all be on board. But Europeans are not. But we also have to ask ourselves, who are the Europeans? Europeans are basically a, a very, very narrow segment of this parasitic leadership who are all extremely unpopular in their own countries.
Right.
So you basically have a small cabal that's running the show, that's hostile to Russia, that wants the United States to do its, as usual, do its heavy lifting and dirty
Knock
work in
some
Ukraine.
heads and be an
Yeah,
idiot. Yeah.
they basically want the United States to go and kill Russia for them. That's what they want.
Yeah.
And now they're not getting it. And not only that, but Daddy's going to tell them transfer the damn assets to, to to
To
us,
us.
and we'll take care of you. And I think that they will have no choice but to comply. I mean, at this point, their options are basically to close themselves off into a block to become like Eastern Germany or North Korea,
Mhm.
like a Sparta, like where, oh, we're gonna just like be a military bloc and we're just going to go to war against Russia and people are gonna have to sacrifice their children. Um, and they would really need a false flag event to trigger such a war, but they're not ready for it.
Right.
And, optimistically, they would be ready for it in 28 or 2029 or 2030. But they need Ukraine to keep on fighting until then. They need the war in Ukraine to continue.
Right.
So I think that they are they don't have good cards to play, and I think they're on the back foot. And I think that the Russians and the Americans are now in the position to simply force them to cooperate. and to and to I think that the result of this might be a wave of regime changes in Europe. That Macron government, Starmer government, um, Friedrich Merz government, Alex Staub government in Finland, uh, Maya Sandu in Moldova. All these governments are going to end up being toppled, uh, whether by democratic means, hopefully, or not, we'll find out. But I think that they're losing credibility. They're already extremely unpopular, and they will not be able to realize their fantasy of defeating Russia.
Right. Okay. So I'm assuming that's where Trump just met with Stammer last week. I'm assuming that was just theater, for lack of a better word, or just Trump. Yeah, okay, listening, if you would, because
You
I
see,
see no cards that they have, as you said, other than these Russian assets that are frozen. I see nothing else that they have to play in this game.
yeah, honestly, I don't know if that's theater. I mean, what we see is theater.
Right.
What they discuss behind closed doors, I don't know what it is, but we've seen well, one of the dark lords in the British establishment was Peter Mandelson. Well,
Mhm.
he's out.
Right.
Um, Epstein's BFF, Prince Andrew, has been stripped of all his royal titles. That's a humiliation for the royal family. It seems to me that Trump is slowly applying pressure, and he's forcing them to come on board or to cooperate and to let go of their, fantasies of running the world. Uh, one important event that happened that nobody talks about because it's not on anybody's radar is what happened in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I said this on a number of podcasts in the last few weeks, but I think it's quite important because the British were kind of rigging Bosnia and Herzegovina to be the second front in the West's war against Russia.
Okay.
And you know, what is Bosnia and Herzegovina? It's a small, almost landlocked country in the heart of the Balkans.
Right.
The capital is Sarajevo. Sarajevo is where World War One was
Yep.
detonated with the
Right.
assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So, and for people living in Bosnia, it was this was very obvious because Sarajevo was crawling with British assets, diplomatic intelligence, PR, charities, but all kind of in a network, and people could sense the tensions rising, and there were increasing provocations between Muslims and Croats, between Muslims and the Serbs, between Serbs and Croats. These are three constituent peoples in the
Mhm.
which is why this is like a powder keg. If you light it up, you
It's
get
gonna
a
go.
war. And then, if things take the same progression as in 1914, you get a European war.
Right.
And back then, 40 million people, there were 40 million casualties of World War One. And so this is what the Brits were playing with regards to Europe. They were actively playing, risking a European wide war, like a World War III, that would have catastrophic results. And so over the recent months, I've been hearing from a number of people from there that things are actually much, much better since Trump came into the White House.
Interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And 3 weeks ago, I had in an event, I met with one of the cabinet members of Republika Srpska. This is the Russian entity of inside of Bosnia. Sorry, not Russian, Serbian entity inside of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I thought, like, great, I have to ask him what's going on. And so I asked him, is it true what I'm hearing that the situation has improved since Trump came to power? And he said, absolutely yes. He said, like, it's like day and night. Like complete, like things are much, much better. The tensions are way down. Everything is under control. And he says, like, we're no longer dealing with the Brits. We're now dealing with the Americans. And he said, like, where Brits were very abrasive and were very aggressive with us, the Americans are much more understanding and they're very accommodating. So he said things are definitely much, much better.
Wow.
He literally
That's
said it's like day and night, the situation.
fascinating.
And from a Croatian politician, I heard he said like it's like a different planet that they're
Wow.
living on now. Yeah. And so why is this important? It's important because, Bosnia and Herzegovina is not a household name. It's not on anybody's radar. You don't have billionaire donors from Bosnia that are manipulating Trump. You don't have a large voting bloc of Bosnian Serbs or Croats or Muslims in the United States. So there isn't a constituency to appease that somebody would
Mhm.
say, like, oh, well, yes, Trump is doing this for political points or because he has real estate projects he wants to develop in freaking Bosnia and Herzegovina. They just did the right thing seemingly for the sake of doing the right thing. And they may have diffused a powder keg that could have led to
That's it.
World War III on European continent.
Yep, that's it.
And nobody's really talking about this because it's not it's obscure.
Right.
But I think it was very, very important. And it indicates that Trump administration is actually interested in peace for the sake of peace. And
Yeah.
this is their strategy. And they're doing it because this couldn't have happened randomly by
Mhm.
accident. Like should be like a tornado sweeping through a junkyard and randomly assembling a car. That doesn't happen. You had to go there understanding that there's a problem.
Mhm.
You had to tackle the problem
Mhm.
and improve the situation. And one last thing about that, I remember a Croatian, this same Croatian politicians that I referred to in a podcast interview, saying how he was invited to Washington D.C. to meet with officials in U.S. State Department, and he said, well, when I went there, I kind of expected I would have to, tell them where Bosnia and Herzegovina is on the map and explain everything. And he said, like, I was stunned that when I got there, people were very, very well briefed and understood exactly what was going on there. So those are all very encouraging signs and some of the reasons why I feel relatively optimistic with regards to the peace 28-point peace plan.
Well, about that though, real quick. So I think that's really significant. You just look at historical history, if you would, not only World War One, but recently as in what, 30 years ago. And I mean that stirring up trouble, make instability in a place that people don't know, and then it spreads to who knows what. And as you indicated, that could have been World War III. So I think that's very, very key and important that things are being de-escalated and not only de-escalated, perhaps even peaceful. But go ahead.
No, what I was going to say about the 28-point peace plan, I think it's not a question about whether it's real or not. I think we have enough feedback from Russian officials to know that it absolutely is real. The
Great.
question is uh, how how effective the Trump administration is going to be in making it happen and making it stick.
Yeah.
But I think that with these corruption investigations, and this is also a Trump administration. This is not just a random thing that's in happening in Ukraine by itself. This is there's two Ukrainian agencies that are anti-corruption. They were set up by the Americans. My understanding is that they're being run by the Americans and particularly the CIA. And they're
Of course.
ostensibly their purpose was to fight corruption, but in reality, they were set up to shield certain people from anti-corruption
Yeah.
inquiries. Because remember, under Biden administration, you had Hunter Biden there with wheeling and dealing. You had Nancy Pelosi's son, I think, was involved in some
Yeah.
Ukraine business. Um, I think Mitt Romney had his family members wheeling and dealing there. Um, who else?
The good Mormon.
John Kerry,
Don't
John
carry. I'm not
John
surprised.
Kerry's stepson, I think, was involved. So they wanted to absolutely shield their corrupt dealings. But now under Trump administration, they turned it around and they turned it into an actual effective anti-corruption machinery. And last August, also in August of this year, uh, Vladimir Zelensky tried to squash these agencies by decree. He wanted to disband them because he
Mhm.
realized that they were hot on his trail. But he wasn't able to do that. It blew up in his face, and the investigations continued. And now we got like 100 million embezzlement charge
Yep.
against his closest collaborators. And now apparently there's a much, much wider inquiry going after tens of billions of dollars. And I think that one is going to prove extremely difficult and embarrassing for people like Ursula von der Leyen and Kaya Kallas and probably BlackRock and who knows what European banks and who knows how far this goes. But it may well be that this was why Trump was in London with Starmer because
Yeah.
maybe he has the goods on them and says like, look, this is going to be very embarrassing for you, so please cooperate with us. If this comes out, it's going to get very, very ugly. So, we can do it the nice way or we can do it the not so nice way. It's so I suspect the behind closed doors, there's a lot of these kinds of talks.
Yeah, and that would be so Trumpian, right? It would be like we can do it this way or we can do it that way. You take the pick.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But okay, so let's play this out a little more. So Europe's we'll talk well specifically Germany, France, and the UK. That's been a theme of our talks really for the past year. They are in the process of imploding their economies. They have no liquidity, if you would. They were banking on using the Russian assets, frozen assets, as the liquidity. So let's say that this plays out the way we think it is, and they no longer have those assets. That's just going to further, they're just going to I mean, that's going to come real soon then, correct?
Yeah, I think they might that might come really soon, which is maybe why the Europeans are in such a panic that it practically a day after this 28-point peace plan leaked out, they quickly came out with their own 24-point peace plan, which is,
Absurd.
very long on wishful thinking and delusion and very short on any hope of becoming a thing at all because
Right.
they practically in every point they made sure it's completely and totally unacceptable to the Russians. So it means that their intent is to keep the war going. That's what you get out of it. Um, I think that as I said, this probably leads to regime changes in Europe, but it will also probably result in either a disintegration of the European Union or it will lead to a very radical overhaul of the European Union because I think it'll give uh, a lot of weight and credibility um, to people like Viktor Orban in Hungary and Robert Fico, who are now in a pretty open conflict with the European Union because
Hmm.
Viktor Orban said that if you don't immediately accept the American 28-point peace plan, we will block every single shred of aid that you want to send to Ukraine. And they can.
Yeah,
They,
it's
they,
right there.
they, they are in a position to do that. They can veto that.
Yeah.
And so I think that they're in a very, very difficult position. I think either a radical reform of EU or a disintegration. And then, at that point, the EU might be replaced by something else. It might be, you know, there are these schemes that were being explored, like what's it called, the Visegrad Group, I think.
I'm not
Which
familiar. Go ahead.
Yeah, that would be like some kind of a union or a customs union or whatever of states, let's say stretching from the Baltics down to the Adriatic Sea. So that would include um, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Croatia, probably Bosnia, Serbia, Montenegro, maybe Bulgaria and Romania. But there you would get like an eastern flank of Europe that might then become a bloc which could open up towards uh, Russia's Chinese Belt and Road Initiative to a customs union with Russia,
Mhm.
Shanghai Cooperation Organization as a different security arrangement. Maybe these countries become BRICS members. Trump is now ostensibly very hostile to BRICS, but I don't know if that's a real hostility or if it's just for, some constituency in the United States. We'll know in time, but I I see it that way. And then, the United States will make itself a partner in all these transitions, and it will make itself one of the godfathers of the new Europe.
Yeah.
So it'll be a great place for American businesses. It'll be a great opportunity for the United States to become. I think it was Larry Johnson who coined this phrase that the United States has a choice of being the global policeman or being the polite guest at the global banquet. And I think that this second option is looking more likely. I think that Trump administration has to work on the polite part, but I understand why they're going around like a cowboy shooting off the hip and being a little bit vulgar about all of it. But it's as the Bible say, you have to judge them by the fruit of their labor rather than by their words.
Maybe not a polite guest at the global banquet, but an attendee at the banquet.
Maybe they'll be a boorish guest, but they'll learn their
Boring.
manners over time, you know. That's so long as they're a guest and they have a nice time.
Right. So, pivot a little bit to Latin America or what you know. And I had a very fascinating, interesting talk with Steve Hanke. I'm assuming you know who Steve is at Johns Hopkins, and he was on the air telling me how the administration he's been talking with the administration about making a dollar centralized, if you would, a dollar countries that are centralized. That somewhat flies in the face. Well, it does fly in the face with BRICS, but specifically in Latin America. And he brought up Argentina with all the reforms that are going through Argentina. And I asked what's in it for the US? Why would, and I'm glad they're doing that, by the way, just for the record, but why would they do that? And he said influence. That was his word. I want to make sure I get that correct. Influence. But work that out for me and how that works with Venezuela, because I'm starting to see this a little bit differently because I was really confused why all of this saber rattling at Venezuela. And now I do see it just having influence, hopefully peaceful influence, over Venezuela oil or resources. How are you seeing that, I guess now? Both of those.
So I have to confess I'm a little bit confused about Venezuela because I think there's a lot of uh, there's stuff that I don't know. For example, I know that you know Venezuela was under sanctions
Right.
imposed by Trump regime and previous regimes, but Trump added like you know the maximum pressure sanctions. And then when the war started in Ukraine in 2022, then the Biden administration sent a delegation to Caracas, and then they lifted the sanctions from Venezuela because they felt that they needed to secure access to Venezuelan oil, and some kind of deal was struck between them. I suspect that we know something about the deal, but there are aspects of the deal that we don't know. And I suspect that part of it has to do with the immigration, you know, and that because it seems that Biden administration were trying to do their best to flood the United States with as many illegal immigrants as possible, and so that they may have told the Venezuelans like, oh hey, you know, by the way, you know, like all these criminals you have in your prisons in Venezuela, well, you know, why don't you just send them over to us?
Hmm.
And so maybe Maduro, you know, to get the lifting of sanctions, Maduro may have made the deal with the devil, and maybe that's part of the equation right now. Um, I, you know, I suspect that there's more than we know, and that the situation is more complicated. I don't buy the story that it's about drugs trade because it was if it were about drugs trade, the top culprit would have to be money laundering banks for the Trump administration.
Yeah.
The next one would have to be Canada,
Yeah.
then Mexico, then Ecuador, and I don't know if
Maybe China too, right? With all of their influx of fentanyl.
well, I think that China sells precursor chemicals. You know, I don't think they deal fentanyl. I mean, there might be Chinese nationals who are part of this, but I don't think this is a Chinese government thing to wage an opium war against the United States. I don't see that.
Mhm.
But you know, Mexico, maybe Colombia, Venezuela doesn't produce any fentanyl.
Right.
So it may be that some cocaine is coming from Venezuela, and I suspect it does, but I don't think it would make your target number one. So I don't buy that part. I also don't buy that the Trump will start a war against Venezuela for a number of reasons. First of all, because it's hugely risky.
Yeah.
You know, they just got back their butts handed to them in Afghanistan by the Taliban.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah,
not
right.
able. They were not able to subdue the Yemenis.
Yeah,
Um, there's there's like too much that can go wrong for Trump if he goes to war against Venezuela, and he doesn't need that just before 2026 midterm elections, which are critical for him.
right.
So I think that maybe we'll see the same as we've seen with Iran, where you got the big show bringing aircraft carriers, bringing the B-2 bombers, the strategic bombers, bringing all these assets to Diego Garcia, making it look like they were about to launch a regime change war against Iran, and then they didn't.
Right.
So I suspect that maybe, this is their style. They're doing all this for whatever reason, and one of them conceivably is even to pull the aircraft carriers from the Mediterranean
Sure.
to leave Israel's butt wide open
Exposed. Yep.
and exposed, so that if they start something with Iran, they're on their own.
Right.
So maybe that's the purpose that Venezuela serves, and we've heard it from Trump himself that they're already in negotiations with the Maduro government. So
Right.
you may be right. I think that what you proposed kind of sounds right, that maybe they're imposing themselves as an arbiter, as the key influence in the region. But then obviously, Venezuela's resources, if they develop them, where do they go? They need a market.
Yeah.
The largest market by far in that region is the United States. So even for Venezuela, it obviously makes sense to deal with the United States and to sell their, oil and whatever else
Mm.
they produce to the Americans. I think we'll know with time. For the time being, it's very difficult to predict. I will be surprised, however, if they launch a war against Venezuela. If they blow up some boats and they blow up some things in Caracas or some military base or something, that may be part of the theater.
Mhm.
But a full-on war like, what we've seen against Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, I don't see that happening.
Yeah. Neither do I. Neither do I. I'm just curious, like why, and it just there's things we don't know. We don't know why, and but I'm suspecting it's to have influence in the region and over oil assets because man, there's so much oil there, and to be candid, I mean, I just think like domestically here, like the east or West Texas crude, they say is plateaued in production, and also the Canadian oil sands, from what I understand, and I'm sure the comments will correct me if I'm wrong, is at peak or beyond peak production as well. So we need oil. So I'm assuming it's like have influence.
Yeah, but you can always buy oil.
Right?
You don't need to, how does Switzerland have oil at their
Yeah.
gas stations? How do cars run in Switzerland or in Serbia or in Germany or anywhere? They run
Yeah.
because they buy their oil, right?
Yeah.
Anybody can do that. The only reason why you would need to regime change a country or conquer it and take it under political control is because you want to turn that oil into collateral in your financial system. And the
Yeah.
only people who want that, are on Wall Street.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
not, like if you live in the United States and you go to the gas pump, you have to pay for oil for gasoline. You don't get it for free if you happen to conquer
Right.
Venezuela or Saudi Arabia or Nigeria or whatever. You still have to pay it. The only people who have interest in actually taking political control of a country and effectively turning it into a colony are always the banking elites.
Yeah. 100%. If you're not going to buy oil, you're going to steal it, more or less. Right.
Yeah.
So I've had you on for a while. I guess what I'm trying to say is, give me your final thoughts until I really talk to you again into the new year, or until I have you on again. What are you looking at, or what should people be aware of from really now until the end of the year, going into next quarter?
Yeah. Well, I would say this, what you think and what you say matters. We, a lot of people think, oh, I'm just a single person. What difference can I possibly make? They wouldn't bother propagandizing us and lying to us and misleading us
If you didn't matter. Mhm.
if it didn't matter. They spend billions upon billions of dollars on propaganda, on misdirection, on manipulations. And so what we think, what we do, what we choose, the pressure we exert on those around us, on our political representatives, it all matters a great deal. And I think that, hats off to the American people that they put Donald Trump in the White House. I know a lot of people will say that I give him too much credit, but um, take the Bosnia story into account and then see if I'm giving him too much credit. Uh, Trump is a flawed man. His administration is full of uh, clashing interests as well. But ultimately, the will of the people will prevail. So if you know what the issues are, if you know what you want from your political leadership, make that known, defend your positions, understand that your voice matters. And I think that we're really in a good shape and that we're winning this fight. I really believe that we're winning this fight. And I think it would be hard to overestimate the importance of that. So, keep on keeping on, defend the freedom of speech, demand peace, demand friendly and constructive cooperation with other nations, and all those things will happen.
Very well said, my friend. So I'll let you go, Alex. But if people want to read more of you, give us your Substack. And to all my viewers and listeners, I am a very happy subscriber to Alex and a supporter of Alex. Go ahead.
Thank you, Andy. So I have two publications on Substack. One of them is a daily market newsletter providing trend following signals for a set of 18 global markets, including gold and Bitcoin. That's iSystem Trend Compass. My other Substack is a personal publication where I publish less frequently, but a broader range of topics, and so that's Alex Krainer's Substack. And I shoot my mouth regularly on X, and my handle is at
Yes, you
Naked
do.
Andy. And for everybody out there, I have uncontrollable attacks of sarcasm when I'm on X. So um, a lot of things I write and say are said with a heavy dose of sarcasm.
Yeah, I catch myself. Should I retweet this? I'm teasing you. No, Alex, thank you so much. You're a good friend.
Always a pleasure, Andy. All the best, and again, greetings to your audience.
All
Take
right,
care.
till until next time. Thank you.
Take care. Bye bye.